In a move that shocked the racing world, the NHRA officially banned these muscle cars far, declaring them too dangerous.
Among the many muscle cars that ruled drag strips in the early 1970s, a few became so fast and so clever that the NHRA had no choice but to stop them. These cars scared officials, shattered records, and forced rulemakers to rewrite the rulebook, forever changing the sport. Welcome back to Regal Rides. Today we're talking about the most feared muscle cars ever built. The ones so wild, they got banned. And trust me, watch this video till the very end, because somewhere in here, I'm going to tell you about a car that was banned before it even made a single run. A secret so unbelievable, even hardcore drag racing fans can't believe it's true. Tell me in the comments, which one of these cars you think should have been allowed to race? And if you love discovering legends like this, hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next will blow your mind. In the early days of drag racing, things were simple. You could take the same car you drove to work, head to the strip, put on a set of slicks, and see what it could do. The classes were called stock, because that's what the cars were supposed to be, stock. But racers are smart, and they started finding every trick in the book to go faster. They cut weight, tuned engines, and used every loophole they could find. Pretty soon, these so-called stock cars were nothing like the ones people saw in showrooms. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, the sport had exploded. The stands were packed, the cars were faster than ever, and Detroit automakers were building special models just to win at the track. But there was a problem. Some of these cars were too good. If you lined up against one of them, you might as well have stayed home. And when one driver or one team wins everything, it stops being fun for the fans. That's where the NHRA had to step in. They wanted the racing to stay close and exciting. They wanted fans to cheer for their favorite brands, not just one unbeatable car. So they started changing the rules. Sometimes they adjusted weight breaks, sometimes they changed what parts you could run, and sometimes they flat out banned a car if they thought it was too extreme. The cars we're looking at today are the ones that went too far. They were so fast, so clever, and so far ahead of the competition that the NHRA had to stop them. Some fans call them unfair, others call them legends. By the end of this video, you can decide for yourself which side you're on. 1968, HEMI Dart and Barracuda. Our first stop takes us straight to 1968, when Chrysler decided it had enough of losing. Ford and Chevy were already fierce competitors on the drag strip, and Chrysler wanted to send a message. They weren't just in the game, they were here to dominate. The result? Two of the most brutal factory drag cars ever built, the Dodge HEMI Dart and Plymouth HEMI Barracuda. These weren't your typical showroom cars. Chrysler's engineers didn't care about radios, heaters, or quiet rides. They cared about one thing: crossing the finish line first. So they stripped the A-body Darts and Barracudas down to the bare bones. The insulation, sound deadening, and even some of the paint, gone. The bodies were acid-dipped to shave precious pounds. Fiberglass hoods and fenders replaced steel panels. Even the windows were swapped for thinner, lightweight glass. The result was a car hundreds of pounds lighter than anything else in its class. A purpose-built missile in streetcar clothing. And then came the real magic. Chrysler dropped in the mighty 426 HEMI, the same legendary engine that terrorized NASCAR. Officially, Chrysler claimed it made 425 horsepower, but insiders knew the truth. It was making well over 500. Right off the trailer, these cars were capable of 10-second quarter-mile passes. In 1968, that was shocking performance. When they arrived at the track, it was pure chaos. The sound of that HEMI shaking the ground, the smell of burning rubber, the front wheels lifting on launch, fans went wild. But for other racers, it was a nightmare. If you didn't have a factory connection, you were racing for second place. These cars were untouchable, and soon the pits were filled with angry competitors saying the same thing: this isn't fair. The NHRA couldn't ignore it. They had to act. Their solution was to move the HEMI Darts and Barracudas out of regular superstock and into special classes. It wasn't a total ban, but it was a clear message. These cars were simply too much for everyone else. And that's exactly what made them legends. Today, an original 68 HEMI Dart or Barracuda is one of the most collectible drag cars ever made. They represent the moment when Detroit stopped pretending to build street cars and started openly building weapons for the drag strip. Which one would you pick if you had the keys, the sinister Dodge Dart or the sleek Barracuda? Tell me in the comments. Sox and Martin Plymouth Cuda. If the HEMI Dart and Barracuda were Chrysler's first strike, The Sox and Martin Plymouth Cuda was their full-scale assault. Ronnie Sox and Buddy Martin weren't just racers, they were legends. Ronnie, known as Mr. 4-Speed, was considered one of the best manual transmission drivers in history. He could shift gears with such speed and precision that it looked almost unreal. Buddy Martin was the brains of the operation, the man who kept the team running like a machine. Together they formed a duo that became the face of Mopar drag racing in the early 1970s. Their car, a bright red, white and blue Plymouth Cuda, wasn't just a race car. It was a statement. When it rolled into the pits, fans crowded around. Kids pointed, cameras clicked, and competitors groaned. Everyone knew that when Sox and Martin were at the track, the rest of the field was probably fighting for second place. The Cuda was built for one purpose: domination. Under the hood sat a 426 HEMI, tuned to perfection. The team experimented with suspension setups, weight distribution, and clutch tuning until the car launched like it was shot from a cannon. And then there was Ronnie Sox. Watching him work the shifter was like watching a concert pianist play. Every movement perfect, every shift timed to the millisecond. Race day after race day, the story was the same. Sox and Martin would qualify at the top of the charts, often a full tenth of a second ahead of everyone else, which in drag racing is a lifetime. Fans loved the spectacle, cheering every time the Cuda's front wheels came up on launch. But for Chevy and Ford teams, it was frustrating. They were tired of losing. Tired of feeling like the outcome was already decided before eliminations even started. The NHRA saw what was happening. Pro Stock was supposed to be about brand rivalries, about Ford versus Chevy versus Mopar. But when one team was winning almost every race, fans of the other brands started tuning out. Something had to be done to bring back the balance. So the NHRA made the call. They adjusted the weight to cubic inch rules, forcing HEMI-powered cars like Sox and Martin's Cuda to carry more weight. It was a controversial decision. Mopar fans felt betrayed, saying the NHRA was punishing success just to give Chevrolet and Ford teams a chance. Chevy and Ford fans, on the other hand, welcomed the move. Finally, they could compete again. The change didn't stop Sox and Martin completely, but it did slow them down enough that Pro Stock became more competitive. For many, this was the end of Mopar's golden age, but in a way, it made the Cuda even more legendary. It became the symbol of a time when one car and one team were so good that the entire rulebook had to be rewritten just to keep the sport alive. Today, the Sox and Martin Cuda is remembered not just as a race car, but as an icon. It represents the peak of Chrysler's factory-backed drag racing program and the moment when NHRA had to step in to save the class. And if you thought that was controversial, wait until you see our next car. This one didn't just get slowed down by rules, it flipped the entire direction of Pro Stock on its head and ended the big block era forever. Bill Grumpy Jenkins' 1972 Chevy Vega. If there was one car that turned Pro Stock upside down, it was Bill Grumpy Jenkins' 1972 Chevy Vega, the car that fans know as Grumpy's Toy Ein. This wasn't just another fast car. This was the moment drag racing changed forever. Let's start with the man himself. Bill Jenkins wasn't like other racers. While most drivers were focused on adding more horsepower, Jenkins focused on science. He was a quiet, serious man from Pennsylvania who earned the nickname Grumpy because he rarely smiled at the track. But behind that serious face was a brilliant mind. He knew engines inside and out, and he believed that brains could beat brute strength. In 1972, NHRA made a rule change that allowed small block cars to run at lighter weights than big block cars. Most racers shrugged it off. They thought bigger engines were still the way to win. But Jenkins saw something no one else did, an opportunity to completely change the game. He looked at the Chevrolet Vega, a car most people laughed at. It was small, cheap, and had a bad reputation. Its engines burned oil, its body rusted too quickly, and muscle car fans thought it was a joke. But Jenkins didn't care about its past. What he saw was potential, a light, aerodynamic shell that could become deadly with the right engine and chassis combination. So Jenkins went to work. He stripped the Vega down and built it back up as a purpose-built drag car. He installed a 331 cubic inch small block Chevy engine based on a bored-out 327 and tuned it to perfection. But the real secret wasn't just the engine, it was the whole package. Jenkins built a near race-only chassis, used MacPherson struts up front, a strong 3-link rear suspension, and made sure the car sat perfectly balanced. It looked mean, sat low, and had headers blasting out of the fenders. Fans had never seen anything like it. When Jenkins rolled the Vega into the pits at the 1972 Winter Nationals, Everyone stopped what they were doing. Other racers stared. Some laughed, others shook their heads. This was Pro Stock, home of big loud Camaros, Mustangs and Cudas, and Jenkins had brought a little economy car to the fight. But NHRA inspectors weren't laughing. They swarmed the car, checking every inch. The tube frame design looked too much like a professional race car. The headers were unconventional, and the car was just too radical. At first, they refused to let it race, but Jenkins didn't back down. He worked overnight to make changes and get the car legal. By the next morning, the Vega passed inspection, barely, and was ready to run. During qualifying, the Vega didn't look like a winner. It was only 17th fastest with a 9.9-second pass. Competitors thought they were safe. But on race day, Jenkins and his crew worked through the night, dialing in the car. In eliminations, the Vega came alive. Round after round, it launched like a rocket and crossed the line first. Each run was quicker, smoother, and more consistent. By the finals, the crowd knew they were witnessing history. Jenkins faced Don Grothier, one of the best Mopar drivers in the country, and beat him. That single event changed Pro Stock forever. Jenkins went on to win 6 of 8 national events that season. The Vega proved that the era of big block Pro Stock cars was over. Small, light, and efficient was the future. The NHRA quickly changed the rules again, trying to slow Jenkins down, but the damage was done. The Vega had become a legend, and Jenkins had become the man who rewrote the book on drag racing. And if you thought that shook things up, wait until you hear about the next car, a Ford so clever that it forced the NHRA to change the rules all over again. Bob Glidden's Ford Fairmont. If Bill Jenkins' Vega opened the door for small, light cars to dominate Pro Stock, Bob Glidden's Ford Fairmont kicked that door right off its hinges. Glidden wasn't just a racer, he was a perfectionist. While other drivers relied on raw talent or factory horsepower, Glidden relied on preparation. He was known for working late into the night, checking and rechecking every nut and bolt on his car. And when he showed up to the track, you knew he had already thought through every single detail. When he chose the Ford Fairmont as his next Pro Stock weapon, most people were shocked. The Fairmont was, well, boring. It was a simple, boxy commuter car, the kind of car your neighbor drove to the grocery store. No one expected to see it become the most feared Pro Stock car of the late 1970s. But that's what made Glidden so dangerous. He could take something ordinary and turn it into a track killer. Glidden and his team completely re-engineered the Fairmont. They built a rigid, lightweight chassis and tuned the suspension until it was perfect. Under the hood sat a screaming 351 Cleveland V8, a small block engine that made insane power at high RPM. The car sat low, looked clean, and was deadly consistent. It might not have looked as wild as Jenkins' Vega, but when the Christmas tree dropped, the Fairmont launched like it was fired from a cannon. Race after race, Glidden's Fairmont became a nightmare for his competition. He didn't just win, he crushed people. His passes were almost identical, run after run. Fans started showing up just to watch how perfect his launches were. Other racers began to whisper in the pits, "If Glidden is here, we're racing for second place." By 1978, it was almost unfair. Glidden won 9 out of 10 NHRA national events, a record that left everyone stunned. His attention to detail was unmatched. He'd tear down engines between rounds, make adjustments no one else even thought of, and somehow go even faster in the next run. The Fairmont wasn't just a car, it was a precision instrument. The NHRA eventually stepped in again, changing weight brakes and adjusting engine rules in an attempt to slow Glidden down. But even with those changes, he kept winning. Fans started calling him Superman, and for good reason. No matter what rules you threw at him, he would find a way to stay ahead. The Fairmont proved that the future of Pro Stock wasn't just about horsepower, it was about engineering, discipline, and relentless preparation, and it cemented Glidden as one of the greatest racers of all time. But as dominant as the Fairmont was, nothing could prepare the NHRA for what came next. A car so radical, so outside the box that they didn't just change the rules after it ran, they banned it before it ever got the chance to make a single pass. The car banned before birth. This is the story I promised you earlier, and it's one of the wildest in drag racing history. Imagine building a car so advanced, so far ahead of its time, that the NHRA never even let it make a pass. That's exactly what happened when Mickey Thompson decided to build his ultimate Pro Stock machine. To understand how big this was, you need to know who Mickey Thompson was. He wasn't just a racer, he was a pioneer. He set land speed records at Bonneville, built some of the first purpose-built dragsters, and even brought the first wide racing tires to the sport. Mickey was always thinking outside the box. If there was a way to go faster, he'd find it, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. In the early 1970s, Pro Stock was the hot class. Jenkins Vega and Glidden's Fairmont had changed the game, and Mickey wanted in. But he wasn't about to build just another Camaro or Mustang. He wanted something that would blow the doors off the competition, literally. So he began working on a Pontiac project that was unlike anything drag racing had ever seen. The car featured a lightweight tube chassis, carefully designed to be as stiff and as light as possible. The suspension geometry was cutting edge, built to keep the car perfectly planted on every launch. The body was smoothed, reshaped, and made to cut through the air like a bullet, and under the hood sat a Pontiac engine with experimental cylinder heads that were rumored to make huge power. As word spread about Mickey's new creation, the pit started buzzing. Some racers said it looked more like a funny car than a Pro Stock car. Others whispered that it might be seconds quicker than anything else on the track. An eternity in drag racing. Competitors were nervous. If this car worked as well as Mickey claimed, it wouldn't just win, it would end the competition completely. When the car finally rolled out for tech inspection, NHRA officials were stunned. This wasn't just pushing the rules, it was leaping past them. After hours of discussion and heated debate, the NHRA made their decision. The car would not be allowed to run. They said it violated the spirit of the rules, meaning it was simply too extreme for Pro Stock. Mickey Thompson was furious. He argued with officials, saying his car was legal and within the written rules. But it didn't matter. The NHRA stood firm. The car was banned before it ever got the chance to make a single pass. That car became one of drag racing's greatest what-if stories. What if the NHRA had let it run? Would it have forced every other team to build cars just as radical? Would Pro Stock have evolved into something completely different? We'll never know. But that mystery is part of what makes this story so powerful. The idea that a car could be so good, so revolutionary, that it scared the rule makers into stopping it before it ever raced, tells you everything you need to know about how wild this era was. Now that we've gone through the list, it's clear these cars weren't just fast, they were game changers. Every single car we talked about today forced the NHRA to make tough choices. Some were slowed down, some were moved to new classes, and some were stopped before they ever got a chance to race. But no matter what happened, they all left their mark on the sport. The HEMI Dart and Barracuda proved that Detroit could build drag strip weapons straight from the factory. They showed the world what a true factory race car could do, and they pushed other automakers to step up their game. Aston Martin's Plymouth Cuda was the definition of domination. A car so good that the NHRA had to change the rules just to give everyone else a chance. Bill Grumpy Jenkins Vega changed Pro Stock forever, proving that small block cars could beat the big block monsters. And Bob Glidden's Fairmont showed that smart engineering and perfect preparation could make a simple boxy Ford into a Pro Stock legend. And then there's Mickey Thompson's banned Pontiac, the one we never got to see run. That car is still a mystery today, and maybe that's what makes it so powerful. It reminds us that drag racing has always been a battle between creativity and control, between racers pushing the limits and officials trying to keep things fair. These cars made drag racing better. They pushed technology forward, made the sport more competitive, and gave fans some of the most exciting moments ever seen on the strip. Even if they were banned, they became legends, proof that going too far is sometimes exactly what it takes to change the game. And maybe that's why we love these stories so much. They remind us of a time when racing was raw, when a single car could show up and shake the whole world. And they make us wonder, who will build the next car that forces the rule makers to start all over again? These weren't just cars, they were legends. They scared officials, crushed records, and changed drag racing forever. Which one was your favorite? Or is there a car you think should have made this list? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this video brought back memories or taught you something new, hit that like button and share it with another car fan who loves drag racing history. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time we're diving into a car so wild that it ended an entire class of racing overnight. You won't want to miss that story. Stick around and check out the other videos on this channel. There's a whole world of legendary machines waiting for you. Let's keep the golden age of muscle cars alive, one story at a time.